If you compressed the entire existence of humanity into a single day, we would have spent 23 hours and 55 minutes as hunter-gatherers. And then, 5 minutes before midnight, we decided to build walls, to lock ourselves in, and to create civilizations. But why? Why did we trade freedom for walls?
Before we keep going, think about it. Was civilization humanity's greatest achievement, or its first big mistake? If that question makes you curious, leave a comment below. And if you enjoy this kind of journey through time, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next story. So, let's find out when it all began and why we never stopped. Imagine you're an archaeologist in 1994, digging somewhere in southeastern Turkey, far from anything that seems remotely interesting. And then you find this. Stone circles, massive, 6-meter-high pillars, each weighing 16 tons, carved with animals, symbols, shapes you can't quite understand. You date them, and then 12,000 years old. Wait, what? By everything we thought we knew about human history, that's impossible. 12,000 years ago, there were no cities, no farms, no civilization. Just small bands of hunter-gatherers roaming the land, hoping not to run into a saber-toothed cat. And those people built this? Welcome to a story about the invention of civilization, or rather about the moment humans stopped simply existing and started making history. This isn't a story about kings or wars. Not yet. It's the story before that, the story of us, of you and me, before we learned to grow wheat, build cities, and systematically oppress each other. Progress, baby. Over the next 2 hours, yes, 2 hours, so grab some tea. We're going to travel from the savannas of East Africa 200,000 years ago to the first cities of Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. From naked apes barely learning to throw stones to humans inventing writing, and with it, history itself. We'll see how we wiped out our megafauna. All of it. Sorry, mammoths. We'll see how we turned wolves into lapdogs. Probably the best decision we ever made. We'll see how religion likely came before civilization, not after. Göbekli Tepe wasn't an accident. And we'll see how the invention of agriculture didn't make us richer, just more. More people, more work, more epidemics. But hey, more people meant more ideas, and more ideas eventually meant YouTube. Mission accomplished? Before we begin, a warning. First, this gets complicated. History is never simple, and prehistory is especially not simple. We have no written sources, no eyewitnesses, just bones, stones, and occasionally skulls covered in clay. Second, we'll be talking about things many people take for granted, but nothing was inevitable. The fact that we live in cities, stream Netflix, and order pizza is the result of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, coincidence, and the occasional catastrophic decision. Third, I might get a little philosophical. Not too much, but enough, because this story isn't only about what happened. It's about why it matters. Spoiler, it's about us, about you, about me, about what it means to be human. So, what is civilization? Good question. Historians, archaeologists, and anthropologists have argued about that for decades, but for the purpose of this story, we'll agree on 5 things. Large populations, more people than nature ever intended. Monuments, things that outlive you, your children, and your grandchildren. Writing, the ability to speak to someone who won't be born for 3,000 years. Productive economy, you no longer hunt, you grow, you breed, you control nature. Hierarchy, inequality, the uncomfortable truth that civilization means some people are worth more than others. Doesn't sound great, does it? And yet, here we are. This isn't a video about data and facts. Well, there'll be plenty of those. But it's really a story. A story of how we, the hairless, slow, fragile primates of Africa, somehow managed to take over the world. And maybe, just maybe, we'll learn something about ourselves along the way. So, buckle up, grab your tea or a beer, which will be thematically appropriate soon enough. Let's start at the very beginning. 200,000 years ago, in East Africa, a naked ape stands in the savannah, probably thinking, damn, where's the next meal? Let's find out how he went from there to here.
Okay, first question. What the hell is civilization anyway? Sounds obvious, right? We all think we know. Cities, roads, governments, Starbucks on every corner, right? Well, wrong. Or at least more complicated. Here's the problem. Civilization isn't a thing. It's an idea, a category we invented to sort the world. And like every human-made category, race, nation, good music, it gets messy fast. Historians have argued about this for centuries. Some say civilization begins when you build cities. Others say it's when you invent writing. Others still, it's culture, art, progress. And then there are those who ask, oh, hold on, who said civilization was good in the first place? Good question. We'll get to that. For this story, we'll agree on 5 criteria. 5 things that have to come together before we can say, okay, this counts as a civilization. And fair warning, some of them are uncomfortable. Criterion 1, large populations. Civilization means lots of people, far more than a natural hunter-gatherer band would have. Anthropologists talk about a magical number around 150, the so-called Dunbar number, the number of people you can keep stable social relationships with. Everyone knows everyone. You know who's trustworthy and who's a jerk. You know this from Facebook. You have 2,000 friends, but how many would help you bury a body? Exactly, about 150. Civilization, though, means 500, 1,000, 10,000, 80,000 in Uruk, the first true city. And that changes everything. After a certain point, you can't just trust everyone. You don't know them. You don't know whether the guy selling you wheat is honest or a cheat. You need systems, rules, hierarchies, laws. You need, well, civilization. Criterion 2, monumental architecture. Civilization builds things that outlast you. Not just a hut or a hearth, but something big, something that endures across generations. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, we'll come back to it. Why does that matter? Because monuments mean 2 things. First, resources. Enough food, time, and labor to build something that doesn't directly help you survive. Think about how absurd that is. Imagine you're a hunter-gatherer scrambling daily to find food, and someone says, hey, let's spend 6 months putting up enormous stones that are absolutely useless. You'd call them crazy. And yet, it happened again and again all over the world. And second, organization. Getting hundreds of people to work on the same project takes leadership, planning, authority. Which brings us to Criterion 3, hierarchy, or why inequality is baked into civilization. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Civilization means some people matter more than others. That's not a moral judgment, it's a historical observation. Hunter-gatherer societies tend to be fairly egalitarian. Sure, there are differences. The best hunter gets respect, the best storyteller gets love, but at day's end, people eat roughly the same things and die of roughly the same causes, and your grave won't be much bigger than anyone else's. Civilization, once it starts, that changes. Suddenly, there are people who don't work the fields. Priests, warriors, administrators, artists. Suddenly, there are larger graves with richer goods, gold, silver,
sometimes even other people buried with them. Yes, we're talking about human sacrifice. We'll come back to that. The point is, civilization requires inequality. Why? Because specialization is inequality. If you're a potter who makes bowls all day, you don't do it because you love bowls. You do it because someone else grows wheat and trades it for your bowls. But what if no one wants your bowls? Then you starve. Specialization creates power. Some roles are more valuable than others. Some people become more valuable than others. The priest engineer who designs irrigation canals? Irreplaceable. If he dies, the whole community suffers. The 10th farmer on the field? Expendable. If he dies, 9 can still manage. Harsh? Absolutely. But that's civilization. Criterion 4, a productive economy. Let's step away from the grim stuff for a moment. Civilization means you control nature. As a hunter-gatherer, you depend on what nature offers. Find berries? Great. No berries? Tough luck. Bring down a deer? Fantastic. No deer? You go hungry. But once you begin to plant wheat, to herd sheep, to keep pigs, you're the boss. Well, almost. You decide when and where your food grows, when and how many animals you slaughter. You're less at the mercy of chance, or at least you reduce it. And that changes everything because a productive economy means surplus. For the first time in human history, you can produce more food than you immediately eat. You can store it, trade it, hoard it, and that means wealth, power, inequality. See how it all connects? Criterion 5, writing. Immortality on clay. This is the big one, the line between prehistory and history, because writing lets you talk to someone living 3,000 years in the future. Picture it. 5,000 years ago, a scribe in Uruk scratches signs into wet clay, probably thinking, God, I hate inventory. Today, we can dig up that tablet, decode it, and read 200 jars of beer, 40 sheep, 12 oxen. We don't know his name, whether he was happy, whether he had children, whether he believed in gods or in nothing at all. But we know he had 200 jars of beer, and somehow that's lovely. Writing makes civilization tangible. Without it, we have stones and bones. With it, we have stories, names, kings, wars, love, hate. With writing, we have history. So, civilization. 5 criteria. Large populations, more people than would be natural. Monuments, things that outlast you. Hierarchy, some people matter more than others. A productive economy, you bend nature to your will. Writing, you speak to the future. Sounds good, right? Well, almost. Here's the paradox. Civilization didn't make us happier. Hunter-gatherers worked maybe 3 hours a day. The rest was stories, rest, and hanging out. Farmers worked from sunrise to sunset, every day, all their lives. Hunter-gatherers ate varied diets, berries, nuts, meat, fish. Farmers, wheat, every day, just wheat. Archaeologists can see this in the bones. Farmers were shorter, sicker, and died younger than hunter-gatherers. But there were more of them. That's the trick. Civilization didn't make us better, it made us more. And more people meant more ideas, more trade, more innovation. Eventually, pyramids, libraries, spaceflight, the internet. Was it worth it? You'll have to decide. For now, let's set the philosophy aside. Now that we know what civilization is, we can ask the interesting question. How did it begin? The answer doesn't start in Mesopotamia or Egypt or even with agriculture. It starts with us, with naked apes on the savannah who had just learned to throw stones. It starts with evolution.
Okay, big time jump. We're going back.
way back, roughly 7 million years. East Africa, tropical forests, trees as far as the eye can see. In those trees, our ancestors, small, hairy primates swinging from branch to branch, eating fruit, probably thinking, this is the life. And then something changes. The trees retreat. Not overnight, evolution is slow, painfully slow, but the climate shifts. Africa dries, rainforests shrink, and in their place spread savannas, grasslands, open spaces. For most primates, that's a catastrophe. No trees means no home. Many species vanish, others retreat to the last scraps of forest. But a few absolute maniacs climb down. Know what? Screw the trees. Let's try the ground. Those are our ancestors, and they are, frankly, a terrible fit for ground life. Let's be honest, we're pitiful. Compare it with lions, leopards, hyenas, really any predator on the savannah, we're hopeless. Speed? Laughable. A cheetah runs 110 kilometers an hour. We manage maybe 30 downhill with a tailwind. Teeth? Lions have scimitars. We have enamel. Claws? We have fingernails. Great for breaking when you open a can. So we're slow, weak, toothless, and basically naked. Why didn't we go extinct on day one? Good question. 3 answers. First, we're not completely hairless. We have hair, just not much, and no insulating fur. That sounds disastrous in the savannah. It was brilliant. We evolved something no other large mammal has at this scale. Sweat glands, a ridiculous number of them, all over the body. Sweating means thermoregulation. Imagine you're a cheetah. You sprint, take down a wildebeest, and then collapse, panting, overheated. Your thick fur traps heat. Your body can't shed it fast enough. You have to lie still for hours, and while you're down, along come the hyenas, the vultures, the lions. Thanks for the buffet, cheetah. We'll take it from here. We, on the other hand, sweat. We can run and run and run. Not fast, but long. Some hunter-gatherer groups still practice persistence hunting. Pick an antelope and just keep it moving. It bolts, rests, and eventually collapses from heat stroke while the human jogger ambles up, sweaty but fine. We're the slowest killers on the savannah, but we get you. Eventually. Our first superpower, endurance. But endurance alone doesn't explain us. The second answer is meat. Our tree-dwelling ancestors were mostly vegetarian. Fruit, nuts, leaves, maybe the odd insect. On the savannah, we turned to meat. Not because we could hunt it at first, but because we scavenged. Two-legged vultures. Not glamorous, but honest. A lion tears open a zebra, eats. Hyenas move in, eat. Vultures finish, and then we arrive. With stones we can throw. More on that in a moment. We scare off the last birds, smash bones with rocks, and slurp out the marrow. Pure energy. Fat, protein, calories. Here's where it gets interesting. More energy forces a choice. Do you spend it on muscle, get bigger, stronger, tougher, or do you spend it on brain? We chose brain. Absurd fact, your brain is about 2% of your body weight and eats 20% of your energy. Wasteful, inefficient, and a winning bet. A bigger brain means better tools, better plans, better communication, better cooperation. And cooperation is the key. 1 human versus 1 lion? Human dies. 10 humans with spears versus 1 lion? Lion dies. 10 humans who can build a trap, manage fire, and funnel a mammoth into a ravine, they own the world. Now for the third superpower, criminally underrated. We can throw. Sounds trivial,
everyone throws. Not really. Chimps can throw, but badly, weak, and inaccurate. A human can hurl a rock at 150 kilometers an hour, accurately from 30 meters away, and kill an animal or another human. Why? Because our whole body is a throwing machine. A 360-degree shoulder joint, a wrist that snaps to add spin, hips that unwind, legs that stabilize. Distance kills. We don't have to get close. Leopard wants to eat us? Stone storm. 10 guys, 10 rocks. The leopard rethinks its life choices. Mammoth too big to fight? Wait till it's in a gully, bombard it from above, break a leg, let time and gravity do the rest. Brutal? Yes. Effective? Absolutely. But evolution is no all-you-can-eat buffet. Every upgrade has a cost. We poured energy into brain, endurance, and throwing, not into raw muscle. Chimps have denser muscle fibers and far more strength, but can't run long, have smaller brains, and can't throw like we do. We're weak, but we're clever and stubborn. In evolution, that's enough. Then, sometime around 1 million years ago, maybe earlier, we learned to control fire. Not to make it yet, just to keep it. A lightning strike, a brush fire, a burning branch we fed with wood. Suddenly, warmth, which let us survive in colder places. Light, which let us stay awake and keep predators at bay. Protection. No animal willingly walks into flame. And cooked food. This is huge. Cooking makes meat easier to digest. Your body spends less energy extracting more nutrients. It's like external digestion. Some of the work is done before the food even enters your mouth. More energy meant more brain, and the brain grew and grew and grew. 2 million years ago, Homo habilis, about 600 cubic centimeters of brain. 1 million, Homo erectus, 900. 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, about 1,400 centimeters. We doubled our brain volume in 2 million years, an evolutionary blink, all thanks to meat, fire, and above all, cooperation. Here's something we forget. We weren't alone. Homo sapiens is just one species among many. Homo erectus in Asia, Homo heidelbergensis, our likely ancestor, Homo neanderthalans, our cousins, Homo denisova, known from DNA, Homo floresiensis, the 1-meter hobbits of Indonesia. And those are just the ones we've found. 100,000 years ago, at least 6 human species shared the planet. They met, traded, interbred, yes, many of us carry Neanderthal DNA, and then they vanished. All of them. Except us. Why? We don't know for sure. Maybe we were more adaptable, flexible, creative. Maybe our language, cooperation, or weapons were better. Or maybe, uncomfortably, we pushed them out, outcompeted them, killed them. The pattern is suggestive. Wherever Homo sapiens appears, other humans disappear soon after. Coincidence? Maybe, probably not. We weren't the strongest or the biggest, but we were the best at working together, planning, and communicating. In a world of limited resources, the best collaborator wins, even if everyone else loses. So by 200,000 years ago, we're here. Homo sapiens, anatomically modern, naked, weak, and clever. Small groups in East Africa, 20 or 30 people, hunting, gathering, telling stories by the fire. We have language, art, ritual. We bury our dead and care for the old. We're almost there, almost civilized, but not quite. Something is still missing. The idea that we can not only use nature, but control it. That idea is coming. First, though, we have to conquer the world.
We've got a big brain now, a very expensive one,
burning 20% of our energy. The question is, what for? Sure, we make better tools, plan ahead, remember where the good hunting grounds are. But be honest, chimps can do a version of that too. What can we do that no other animal can? The answer, oddly enough, isn't think or use tools or even make fire. It's gossip. I'm serious. Our absurdly costly brain didn't evolve to crack nuts. It evolved to understand other people. Consider a classic contrast. Teach a chimp, here's a nut, here's a stone, smash the nut, get the treat. The chimp learns fast, not stupid at all. Now add a second chimp. The first doesn't really teach the second. He has to figure it out himself. Humans, one person learns stone plus nut equals food and immediately shows everyone else. Look, do it like this. Boom, nut's open. We want to share knowledge. We're addicted to it, not because we're altruists, but because it's strategic. If you know something and I know something and we share, now we both know both. We're stronger together. That's the core of our superpower, cumulative culture. Every generation stands on the last. Nobody has to reinvent the wheel, literally. A chimp in 2025 is as chimp smart as a chimp 100,000 years ago. A human in 2025 has smartphones, space travel, and the whole of Wikipedia in their pocket, not because any one of us is smarter, but because we're standing on 200,000 years of stacked knowledge. And somehow, some people still think the Earth is flat. But I digress. When exactly did language arise? We don't know. Language doesn't fossilize, but we can infer. Homo sapiens has a lower larynx than other primates, more control over sounds, more nuance, a specialized hyoid bone, and brain regions for production and comprehension. We could speak richly, subtly. Why did we need it? Not just to shout, "Danger above!" Chimps have distinct calls for eagles, leopards, snakes. We needed to say things like, "Did you hear Grok fell asleep during the hunt yesterday? Unbelievable! We should stop taking him." Yes, gossip. Chimps spend hours grooming each other. That's not hygiene, it's social glue. I like you, we're friends, I've got your back. But grooming takes time. As groups grow from 20 to 50 to 150, you can't groom everyone daily. Math won't allow it. So we invented something better, language. With words, you can groom multiple people at once, forge alliances, pass information, and crucially, talk about others. Watch out for Grok, he's lazy. Suddenly, everyone knows, reputation suffers. Grok either shapes up or gets iced out. Brutal, but effective. Language isn't just communication, it's social control, and that changes everything. Robin Dunbar noticed a correlation. Bigger primate brains, bigger groups. For humans, the practical limit is roughly 150. That's the number of people you can know in a meaningful way, names, families, quirks, who's trustworthy. Prehistoric communities often hover around that size. So do traditional villages. So does a military company. The number of birthdays you truly remember? Fewer, but let's say, in theory, 150. Here's the catch. In a group of 150, there's no anonymity. Everyone knows what everyone does, who's generous, who's trustworthy, who's an ass. Reputation is everything. Help someone today and people remember. Need help tomorrow and they show up. Cheat someone today and everyone knows. Tomorrow, no one helps. That's reciprocal altruism, not kindness, but strategy. And it only works in small groups where everybody knows everybody. What happens when the group gets bigger? 10,000, 80,000, like Uruk. Reputation breaks down. You can't know everyone. So you need something else. Law, police, religion, hierarchy. You need civilization. That comes later. Let's talk about old people. In the wild, once animals can't reproduce, evolution has little use for them. Life is expensive. A slow elephant gets eaten, an old wolf that can't hunt starves. Brutal, but that's natural selection. Humans? We have grandmothers. Around 60,000 years ago, perhaps earlier, we start finding skeletons with no teeth and healed jaws. These people lived years after losing their teeth. How? Someone fed them. Someone cared. Why? Because elders are valuable. They may not hunt or carry loads, but they pass on knowledge. Picture your group encountering a new animal. Nobody knows if it's poisonous or how to hunt it. Then Grandma says, "I remember, 40 years ago we saw these here. This is how we hunted them. And watch out, they charge if you get too close." That saves lives. Elders are living libraries, memories of droughts, migrations, techniques, stories. In a world without writing, without Google, elders are Google. That's the grandmother hypothesis. Humans live long, especially women after menopause, because helping grandchildren boosts the whole group's success. They watch the kids so parents can hunt. They transmit knowledge. Here's another curious link. The brain areas for fine motor control, hands and fingers, connect directly to language areas. Solve a Rubik's Cube and you light up some of the same regions as when you speak. Both require sequential planning. Word to word to word in order. Strike to strike to strike in order. As we learn to craft more complex tools, not just banging rocks together, but napping a precise edge, we trained our language circuits as well. Tools didn't just help us survive, they made us better speakers. The better we spoke, the better we could cooperate. The better we cooperated, the better tools we made, which made us better at speaking. Call it an upward spiral, or if you're gloomy, a vicious cycle. And gestures. We don't just talk, we wave our hands constantly. It's not optional, it's fundamental. Try telling a complex story without moving your hands. Hard, isn't it? Gestures carry direction, size, emotion, timing. The fish was this big. Without hands, it's meaningless. One theory says language began as gesture, pointing, miming, storytelling with hands, and words came later. We don't know for sure, but the link is real. Then something strange happens. Around 100,000 years ago, maybe earlier, humans start making things with no practical use. Strings of shill beads worn as jewelry, ochre ground and painted on bodies, figurines of women with exaggerated breasts and hips, the Venus of Willendorf, of Dalny Vistanites. And of course, cave paintings, bison, horses, hands, deep underground, where no one goes except for what exactly? That isn't survival, that's culture. Thinking about the world, telling stories, inventing symbols, ideas, belief. We bury our dead with care, with goods, with flowers. That means we're thinking about death, grieving, perhaps hoping for something beyond. We have religion, or at least its beginnings. We find unusual graves. A woman in today's Turkey, buried with a tortoise shell, a severed leg, not her own, bird feathers, strange stones, not a normal burial. Someone special, maybe a shaman, a go-between linking this world and another, a healer, a curser, a seer. We don't know. We do know she mattered enough to be treated differently, which tells us that 20 or 30,000 years ago, there was already specialization, not just hunters and gatherers, but hunters, gatherers, tool makers, storytellers, healers, roles, identities, the beginnings of society.
So here we are, language, culture, art, religion, grandmothers passing on knowledge, reputation steering behavior. We're no longer just animals. We're human. And yet, we're still hunter-gatherers, small bands, always on the move, owning almost nothing. And still, we're ready. Ready for the next step. Soon, very soon, we'll find a companion, a partner, a friend. And that friend will change everything.
Okay, brief break from the hard science. Let's talk about the best thing that ever happened to humanity. Not fire, not the wheel, not even agriculture. Dogs. The domestication of the dog might be the most successful partnership in the history of life. I mean that. Sometime between 40,000 and 15,000 years ago, the dating is complicated. Humans and wolves essentially decided, you know what? Let's be friends. And that friendship changed the world. Picture a small human group 30,000 years ago. You've just brought down a reindeer. You eat the meat, crack the bones, take what you can carry, and leave the rest. Bones, cartilage, innards, scraps. That's your trash heap. It stinks. But you'll move on soon enough. The wolves don't. Or rather, the ancestors of our dogs don't. They discover that humans are mobile supermarkets. We kill big things and leave perfectly edible leftovers. So they follow. From a safe distance, not too close, humans are dangerous, but close enough to scavenge. And the humans? Oh, wolves. Handy. They clean up our garbage. That's the beginning. No love at first sight, no Disney montage, just mutual benefit. Wolves get food. Humans get what exactly? An early warning system. Wolves are paranoid, in the useful way. They hear better than we do, smell better, and react to everything. A rustle in the bushes, low growl, a scent on the wind, heads up. A saber-toothed cat stalking the camp, the pack goes on high alert. Humans wake up, thanks wolf, that could have gone badly. That's priceless, especially at night. Wolves sleep lightly, humans sleep deep. Together, safer. Over generations, over millennia, the boldest wolves, the ones least afraid of people, do best. They come closer, get more scraps, raise more pups. Humans start to notice. This one, he's nice. He doesn't bite. He warns us. He's useful. And eventually, somewhere, someone takes a pup home. Here's the wild part. In the Soviet Union, Dmitry Guryev tried to prove you could domesticate wild animals quickly. He bred silver foxes, choosing only the tamest each generation, the curious ones, the ones that didn't try to bite. After 10 generations, the foxes wagged their tails. After 20, they licked hands and begged for cuddles. And their bodies changed too. Floppy ears, curled tails, shorter snouts, patchy coats. They started to look like dogs. That's the domestication syndrome. Select for tameness, and you don't just change behavior, you reshape biology. Lower stress hormones ripple through development. Ear cartilage, coat color, body shape. Evolution is weird, but the point is clear. Something like this happened with wolves. For thousands of years, we, consciously or not, favored the friendliest. Wolves that didn't eat us, that helped us. Those wolves became dogs. Now, the timeline is messy. The oldest unmistakable dog burials are around 14,000 years old. Skeletons clearly different from wolves, with shorter snouts and smaller skulls, laid to rest near humans with care. Moving stuff. But genetics points to a split from wolves around 40,000 years ago, maybe earlier. Both can be true. The genetic split created a population of proto-dogs distinct from wolves, but they probably still looked and acted very wolfish. Only later, once people settled more often,
Once villages appeared, did dogs become truly dog-like? Smaller, tamer, more diverse. So let's say domestication begins around 40,000 years ago, while dogs as we'd recognize them appear as teenage dogs around 15,000 years ago. Fair? What do dogs do for us? First, alarms. We've covered that. Second, hunting partners. Dogs can run, track, and harry prey. They drive animals toward people or hold them at bay until we arrive. That's massively more efficient than hunting alone. Studies of modern foraging groups suggest hunting with dogs can raise success by roughly 50%. That's not a luxury. That's a game changer. Third, warmth. Yes, dogs are fluffy heaters. There's an old saying among some indigenous peoples of North America, a 3-dog night is so cold you need 3 dogs to stay warm. In a world without central heating, that can mean life or death. Fourth, work. Much later, dogs will pull sleds, herd livestock, catch rats, sniff out truffles. At the start, though, they're companions, helpers, guards, partners. And then there's the thing no other domesticated animal does. Dogs look you in the eye. Really, try it. A horse looks away. A cat looks at you like it's planning your demise. It might be. A dog meets your gaze, waits for your reaction. When that happens, oxytocin, our bonding hormone, the same one a mother releases looking at her infant, spikes in both human and dog. Dogs hacked our brain chemistry. I love you. Please feed me. It works every time. Embarrassing how easy we are. But it's not one-sided. Dogs love us back. When a dog sees its person, its brain lights up with dopamine, joy, more than for food, more than for toys. A dog is happier to see you than anything else in the world. That's beautiful. So why dogs and not, say, zebras or bears or lions? Because domestication is hard. Animals need the right profile. Not too skittish, not too aggressive. Social hierarchies that can accept an alpha, flexible diets, quick reproduction. Dogs tick every box. Pack animals, omnivorous enough to eat scraps, breeding yearly, and, crucially, a subset that isn't terrified of us. Zebras? Mean. They bite more people per year than lions. Bears? Solitary. No hierarchy to plug into, and they might eat you. Lions? Too dangerous, too expensive to feed, and they don't respect you. Dogs got lucky. Or we did. Probably both. Then something astonishing happens. Dogs go everywhere we go. Europe, Asia, Australia 4,000 years ago as dingoes, then the Americas with the first peoples crossing Beringia. Every continent, every culture, and each culture shapes them differently. Big, powerful sled dogs in Siberia, tiny fluff balls in China for company, and sometimes food. Hunters, herders, and guardians across Europe. Today, there are over 340 breeds, from 2-kilogram Chihuahuas to 80-kilogram Irish Wolfhounds, all from the same animal. That's evolutionary plasticity. That's human selection. That's partnership. So, 40,000 years ago, a human and a wolf met by a trash heap, on a dark night, during a hunt, and perhaps without realizing it, chose to be partners. Not master and slave, not hunter and prey, partners. And that partnership endures. Dogs still help us, herding sheep, sniffing contraband, guiding the blind, comforting the traumatized, and we love them for it. Because dogs don't judge. They don't care if we're successful, beautiful, or rich. They just ask, "Are you here?" If the answer is yes, they're happy. That might be the loveliest note in the whole story of civilization. Somewhere on the road from apes to city dwellers, we found a friend. And the friend stayed. But back to the larger story. While we were domesticating dogs, something else, something dramatic was happening. The world was changing. The climate was changing.
and we had to adapt or die.
Jump ahead. We're about 100,000 years in the past. Homo sapiens exists, anatomically modern, in East Africa. We have language, tools, maybe even the first proto-dogs. Things are going well. And then it gets cold, really cold. Welcome to the last ice age, the time when much of the world lay under kilometers of ice. That changes everything. First, ice ages are normal. Earth cycles. Roughly every 100,000 years, it cools, ice sheets grow, sea levels drop. Then it warms, glaciers retreat, seas rise. We live in a warm interglacial right now. The last ice age ended about 12,000 years ago, but for most of human existence, it was ice. Look at a map around 20,000 BCE. Scandinavia under mountains of ice. Britain half glaciated and half tundra. Northern Germany, Poland, the Baltic, ice. Canada buried beneath the Laurentide ice sheet, up to 3 kilometers thick. Picture your whole country under ice and more ice on top. You might say, but Africa was safe, right? Partly. An ice age affects the whole system. When that much water is locked up as ice, sea level falls by more than 120 meters. Beringia becomes a land bridge between Asia and the Americas. Indonesia and Australia sit closer together. Island hopping becomes easier. The Persian Gulf is a river valley. The English Channel is dry. But colder oceans mean less evaporation, fewer clouds, less rain. In Africa, that means drought. Savannas shrink, forests vanish, the land gets harsher. Less food, fewer animals, fewer plants, fewer people. Geneticists see something terrifying in our DNA. Around 70,000 years ago, the human population may have bottlenecked to as few as 10 to 20,000 individuals. That's small, smaller than a mid-sized town, perilously close to extinction. Humans today carry remarkably little genetic diversity, less than chimpanzees. A single chimp troop in Tanzania can hold more variation than all 8 billion of us combined. We're the descendants of a tiny group that somehow made it through. What happened? One candidate is the Toba supervolcano on Sumatra, which erupted about 74,000 years ago, the biggest blast in 2 million years. Enough ash to dim the sun for years, a volcanic winter, global cooling, dying plants and animals, and humans pushed to the brink. Almost, but not quite. We're stubborn. Then, roughly 70 to 60,000 years ago, something else. People left Africa again. Not the first exit, that was Homo erectus 2 million years earlier, and Neanderthals were already in Europe and West Asia, but this time we stayed. And this time we displaced everyone else. We followed the coasts, south around Arabia, along India, into Southeast Asia. Why the shore? Because food, shellfish, fish, crabs, seaweed, a permanent beach buffet. Around 50,000 years ago, we reached Australia. Over 100 kilometers of open water at points. We needed boats, simple, but boats. And we made it. And then, the uncomfortable part. Wherever Homo sapiens arrived, the megafauna died. Australia lost Diprotodon, the hippo-sized wombat, Megalania, a 7-meter monitor lizard, the marsupial lion, giant kangaroos, giant birds. Eurasia lost woolly mammoths and rhinos, giant deer, cave bears. The Americas would lose giant ground sloths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, native horses. The timing lines up eerily well with our arrival.
Africa is the exception. Elephants, rhinos, giraffes, hippos survive because they grew up with us. They learned to fear us, to avoid us, to adapt. Elsewhere, animals saw small naked primates and thought harmless, surely. Spoiler, not harmless. We weren't super predators individually. One human versus one mammoth. The human dies. 10 humans with spears, fire, and a plan. The mammoth dies. We hunted with strategy. Pits roofed with branches, drives into ravines, bombardments from above. Break a leg, wait it out, and then feast. Brutal? Yes. Effective? Absolutely. The tragedy is demographic. Megafauna reproduce slowly, an elephant calf every few years, mammoth similar. You don't have to kill many each year to collapse a population. Over centuries, they vanish, and we likely didn't even notice it happening. One day, you hunt mammoth like always. Some years later, no more mammoths. Our first large-scale ecological disaster. Not our last. To be fair, climate mattered. As the Ice Age ended, habitats shifted. Tundra gave way to forest. Cold-adapted grazers lost ground. But megafauna had survived many glacial swings before. Why go extinct this time? Because we were there. Climate weakened them. We finished the job. Teamwork makes the dream work. Tragic for mammoths. We didn't only displace animals. We displaced people, too. Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, they'd lived in Europe and West Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. Strong, robust, with brains as big as ours. They had tools, fire, burials, caregiving. They were human, just a different kind. Then we arrived. By 50,000 years ago, our ranges overlap. By 40,000, many Neanderthals remain. By 30,000, fewer. By 28,000, they're gone. Did we kill them? Sometimes, probably. More often, we outcompeted them. Better networks, richer communication, more flexible strategies. They couldn't keep pace. But it wasn't all war. There was love, or at least sex. Today, most people outside Africa carry 2 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. They didn't entirely disappear. They live on in us. Whether that's comforting is up to you. And amid the cold, the dying, and the grinding struggle, something wonderful. We paint. Deep in caves, by oil lamps, with ochre and charcoal. Bison, horses, mammoths, lions, and hands. Our hands stenciled on stone. Not doodles, art. Detailed, dynamic, sometimes even animated. In Chauvet, 36,000 years old, layered horses seemed to run. Why did we do it? Maybe hunting magic. Paint the animal and then kill it. Maybe shamanism, rituals and spirit worlds. Maybe just beauty. The urge to make something that lasts. Either way, it lasts. 36 millennia later, we look and think, that's human. So here's the paradox. The Ice Age was brutal, cold, deadly. It nearly finished us, but it also made us better, more inventive, flexible, cooperative. We built better tools and clothing, crafted sharper strategies, migrated farther, found new lands, tried new ways. In the process, we became who we are. 12,000 years ago, the ice retreated. Seas rose. The climate warmed. We were everywhere. Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia, and soon the Americas. We survived. Against the odds. We erased megafauna, outlasted the Neanderthals, made art, perfected language, and found a friend. The dog. Now the world opens. The ice is gone. The land is rich. We're ready for the next step. In a remote corner of what is now Turkey, something impossible happens. People who aren't farmers, who don't know cities, build this. Stone circles, monumental, and older than anything we thought possible. And it overturns everything we believed about how civilization began.
1994, southeastern Turkey. A German archaeologist, Klaus Schmidt, stands on a hill locals call Göbekli Tepe, the pot-bellied hill. Someone dug here in the 1960s, found a few stones, shrugged, medieval cemetery, nothing to see, and left. Schmidt sees something else. The shape of the mound, too regular, too symmetrical. Worked stones, very old stones. He digs and finds them. T-shaped pillars, 6 meters high, weighing tons, carved with animals. He dates them, 11,600 years old. He double-checks, tests again, same result. This thing, he says, made my textbooks obsolete. Why is that so absurd? Because the standard story, the old order, goes like this. Step 1. People settle and build villages. Step 2. They invent agriculture, wheat, barley, sheep, goats. Step 3. Surplus follows. More food, more people, complexity. Step 4. Specialization, potters, smiths, priests. Only then do they build monuments, temples, palaces. Göbekli Tepe spits on that sequence. It was built before agriculture, before herding, before pottery, before permanent settlement. The builders were hunter-gatherers, small, mobile groups chasing gazelles, who in their spare time quarried 16-ton stones, hauled them uphill, and carved them with exquisite reliefs. What the hell? So what did they build? A complex of circular stone enclosures 10 to 30 meters across, each with 2 towering central pillars surrounded by a ring of smaller but still massive pillars. All limestone, hewn, smoothed, carved. Foxes, boars, snakes, scorpions, vultures, lions, gazelles, and human arms and hands etched onto the T-pillars. The T isn't abstract, it's a stylized human. The top is head and shoulders, arms engraved along the sides, sometimes a loincloth. Giants in stone. Who are they? Gods? Ancestors? Heroes? We don't know. How did they do it? Nearby quarries still hold half-freed pillars showing the method. Mark the shape. Hack around it with stone tools, for days and weeks. Undercut and pry it loose. Then somehow move 16 tons up a hill. Rollers, sledges, ropes, hundreds of people. Dig a socket, stand the pillar and carve. That's not a weekend project. That's years, maybe decades, for a single circle. There are at least 20 circles. We've excavated 4. The rest wait below, perfectly preserved. These weren't primitive foragers. They operated at scale. Food supply secured, labor coordinated, leadership in place. And the goal wasn't a village. Göbekli Tepe is no town, it's a temple. No houses, no hearths, no domestic trash. What you do find are heaps of animal bones, huge fire pits for feasts, stone basins, maybe for beer, blood, or water. People came here regularly from far away for ritual, festival, community, and perhaps worship. What exactly did they revere? The towering humans? The animals? Ancestors? Spirits? We don't know. Some think certain carvings map the sky, an early star chart. Others call that wishful thinking. Welcome to archaeology, where everyone has a theory, and proof is scarce. There's also the skull cult. Human skull fragments incised with grooves, some pierced as if to hang. Across the region, roughly the same time, we see related practices. At Jericho, plastered skulls modeled into faces with shell eyes. At Ain Ghazal, ancestor statues. Death wasn't an end, it was a transformation. Either veneration of kin or trophies of enemies. We can't be certain which, but the dead remained among the living.
Why build it? A few ideas. Community glue, a neutral meeting ground for scattered bands to gather, feast, trade, tell stories, and crucially, find mates. Small groups risk inbreeding, big festivals mix genes. Göbekli Tepe as prehistoric Tinder. Control. Whoever ran the rites could wield power. If everyone must come here, tribute flows through the hands of the ritual leaders. Religion as an instrument of authority. Hardly a new idea. Spiritual hunger. Maybe they didn't need a practical reason. Maybe they wanted to make something bigger than themselves, something that would outlast them, worthy of gods or the cosmos. That's deeply human. We build cathedrals, pyramids, space stations, not because we must, but because we want to. And then the strangest twist. Göbekli Tepe wasn't abandoned or destroyed, it was buried, deliberately, filled in with thousands of tons of earth and stone. Why? To protect what was sacred? To say farewell as life changed? Villages rising, priorities shifting? To seal a place made taboo? We don't know, but they clearly meant it to endure. And it did, quietly, for 12 millennia, until a shaven struck soil in 1994. So, what do we learn? First, religion came before civilization, not as a byproduct of cities, but as a catalyst. To build Göbekli Tepe, people had to cooperate, organize, and create hierarchies. That groundwork made later steps possible. Second, hunter-gatherers were not primitive. They were as smart, creative, and spiritual as we are, with different priorities. Third, monumental building isn't rational in the narrow sense. Nobody needs a 6-meter pillar with a scorpion in relief. And yet we build them because we're human, and humans make things. Göbekli Tepe proves that long before cities, writing, and states, we already had something profoundly human, the urge to leave a mark, to say, we were here. 12,000 years later, we can still hear it. But Göbekli Tepe is only the beginning. In the same region, around the same time, something else begins, something that truly remakes the world. People stop gathering wild plants and start planting them. Welcome to the Neolithic Revolution.
Okay, question. Why here? Why didn't civilization begin in Africa, where we'd lived for 200,000 years? Why not in Australia, settled for 50,000 years? Why not in Europe, East Asia, or the Americas? Why here, of all places, this crescent between the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf, from the Levant, today's Israel, Lebanon, Syria, across southern Turkey to Mesopotamia, modern Iraq? The Fertile Crescent. The answer? A biological lottery. Nature rolled the dice, and the Fertile Crescent hit the jackpot. Here's the list that matters. Wild plants that just happen to grow there, ready to use. Einkorn wheat, wild, edible. Emmer wheat, wild, even better. Barley, wild, perfect for bread and beer. Lentils, wild, protein. Peas, wild, more protein. Chickpeas, even more protein. Flax, wild, for fiber, clothing, linseed oil.
That is not normal.
Compare. Sub-Saharan Africa, African rice. Okay, but hard to domesticate. Yams. Good, but labor-intensive. Sorghum. Works, but not as productive. North America. Teosinte, the ancestor of maize, but tiny and barely edible. It needs millennia of breeding. Sunflowers. Great for oil, not a staple. Squash. Useful, but a side dish, not a base. South America. Wild potatoes. Excellent, but the Andes are isolated and hard to spread from. Quinoa. Also good, also isolated. Australia. Macadamias. And not much else. Australia, I love you, but you lost plant bingo. The point is, the Fertile Crescent started with more edible, nutrient-dense, easily domesticated plants than any other region on Earth. That's not culture, it's geography. It also sits in a Mediterranean climate. Mild winters, hot, dry summers that aren't too dry, and 2 rainy seasons, perfect for plants. The land is hilly rather than flat, which matters because hills create microclimates. A valley stays moist, a slope dries out. North-facing slopes are cooler, south-facing warmer. On a small patch of land, many species thrive. For hunter-gatherers, that means variety without long migrations. And when you finally start to experiment, what happens if I put these seeds here? You have options. But plants alone don't make the leap. You need animals, and here too, it's a jackpot. In the Fertile Crescent, you find, in the wild, mouflon, which becomes sheep, Bazar goats become goats, wild boar becomes pigs, aurochs becomes cattle, onagar, wild ass, becomes donkeys. 5 of the most important domesticated animals in human history, all in one region. Compare again. Africa. Zebras. Too aggressive. They bite more people per year than lions. Hippos. Don't laugh. They kill more people than any other African animal. Domestication? Impossible. Giraffes. Too tall, too specialized, too giraffe. Americas. Bison. Too aggressive. Later attempts failed. Llamas? Yes, but limited to the Andes, and they carry at most around 30 kilograms, not riding animals. Alpacas? Great for fiber, not for work. Australia? Kangaroos? No. Wombats? Adorable. Still no. Emus? They run, they fight, and the country literally waged a war on them in 1932 and lost. Australia, you're out. The Fertile Crescent had the perfect combination. Herd animals with social hierarchies, capable of accepting humans as leaders, breeding quickly, sexual maturity in a year or 2, not too aggressive, not too skittish. In a word, domesticable. And they're all right there. So we have the plants, we have the animals. How did people get the idea to domesticate them? Picture this. You're a forager 12,000 years ago, moving through your seasonal rounds. Every year, you return to the same places. In spring, there's a valley with wild wheat, lots of it. You come back annually, fill your baskets, and one day someone thinks, what if we just stay? The problem with mobility is hunting and gathering. You follow the resources, berries here in spring, nuts there in autumn, game over there in winter. You can't own much. Everything you own, you carry. No heavy pots, no big stores, no permanent houses. But if the resources keep showing up in the same spot year after year and in abundance, you can stop moving. And they do. Around 12,000 to 10,000 years ago, the first semi-permanent settlements appear. Not true villages yet, seasonal camps reused for years. The Natufian culture in the Levant, roughly 12,500 to 9,500 BCE, builds round huts of stone and wood with thatched roofs. They use stone mortars to grind wild grain and flint-toothed sickles set in wooden handles to harvest wild wheat.
They're still gatherers, not planters, but they linger for months, sometimes a whole year. Then, the climate snaps. About 12,900 years ago, temperatures plunge, the Younger Dryas, an abrupt return to Ice Age conditions right in the middle of the warming trend. 5 to 10 degrees cooler in a few decades. Plants die back, animals migrate, the lush valleys of the Fertile Crescent thin out. People have a problem. They've grown used to abundance, formed larger groups, had more children, and now food is scarce. Two choices: go back to mobility, smaller groups, nomadic life, or stay and act. They choose to act. People begin planting seeds, not by accident or idle curiosity, but to survive. They've noticed that when seeds hit the soil, new plants appear. So why not do it on purpose? Why not collect the biggest, tastiest seeds and put them where you live? They try it. It works. Not perfectly, not at once, but it works. By around 10,000 years ago, 80,000 BCE, einkorn is domesticated. Soon after, emmer, barley, and lentils. Domesticated means the plants change. Wild wheat shatters at maturity. The seeds fall to the ground, great for the plant's reproduction. Domesticated wheat holds together. The seeds stay on the head, bad for the plant, perfect for human harvesting. That's artificial selection. Year after year, people sow the seeds of the best plants, the biggest, the ones that don't shatter, and over generations, the plants become dependent on us, and we become dependent on them. Animals follow a similar path. Around 10,000 years ago, sheep and goats are domesticated. Hunters kill wild sheep but spare the lambs. Raised near people, they get used to us and tame up. Someone realizes this is convenient. No more hunting. The animals are here. Keep them, breed them, select the calmest. A few generations later, the animals have changed. Smaller brains, less stress, less flight response, droopier ears, speckled coats. The domestication syndrome, just like the foxes. It shows up in every domesticated species: sheep, goats, pigs, cattle, dogs. Select for tameness and you reshape the whole biology. Pigs come a bit later, about 9,000 BCE. They eat anything: kitchen scraps, roots, carrion, walking garbage disposals you can later turn into dinner. Win-win for us, not for the pigs. Then, about 9,000 years ago, something new appears. Çatalhöyük in central Turkey. Not a camp, not a temporary site, a village of several hundred people, occupied for centuries. It's strange. Mud brick houses packed tightly together with no streets. The homes literally glued side by side. You enter from the roof. Each house has a ladder to a rooftop opening that serves as a door. Maybe that's for defense. No doors at ground level are harder to attack. Maybe it's efficient use of space. Or maybe they just had unusual ideas. Stranger still, they bury their dead beneath the floor. At home. Grandma dies, you dig a pit in the living room, lay her in, cover it up, and go on with life. Sometimes, years later, they remove the skull, plaster it, model a face, and display it, the skull cult, alive and well. And then there's Jericho, roughly the same time in the Levant near the Jordan. Smaller than Çatalhöyük, but it has what Çatalhöyük does not, a massive stone wall, 3.6 meters high and 1.8 meters thick, plus an 8.5 meter stone tower, the oldest known defensive works, 10,000 years old. Why? Because there are enemies, other groups hungry or envious. Jericho sits on an oasis, fresh water, lush growth, valuable and limited. And when things are limited, people fight. So why the Fertile Crescent? First, plants, wheat, barley, lentils, wild and easy to domesticate. Second, animals, sheep, goats, pigs, cattle, present and domesticable. Third, climate, mild, 2 rainy seasons and hills that create microclimates. Fourth, geography, central between 3 continents, ideas spread easily. Other regions had parts of this package. China had great plants, rice and millet, but fewer suitable animals. Mesoamerica had maize, but it took millennia to breed, no large domesticable mammals. The Andes had potatoes and llamas, but were isolated by mountains. The Fertile Crescent had the lot. And that's why civilization begins there. Not because the people were smarter or more industrious, but because nature handed them the tools. Geography is destiny. But here's the irony. This revolution, from hunting to herding and farming, didn't make us happier. If anything, it made us more numerous, not better.
Time for an uncomfortable truth. The Neolithic Revolution, the shift from foraging to farming, is often sold as progress, the moment humanity grew up, mastered nature, and took control of its fate. No, the Neolithic Revolution wasn't a liberation. It was a trap, one we walked into willingly and never escaped. Let me show you what I mean. Modern studies suggest hunter-gatherers work 3 to 5 hours a day, and not even every day. The rest of the time, they relax, tell stories, play, sleep, make art. The Kung San in the Kalahari spend roughly 15 hours a week on food gathering. Australian Aboriginal groups show similar patterns, not because they're lazy, because it's enough when you know where to look. Farmers? They work from sunrise to sunset, every single day. Prepare fields, plow, sow, weed, water, harvest, thresh, store, and that's just plants. Then feed animals, milk them, herd them, slaughter them. In winter, repair tools, sort seed, get ready for next year. No vacations, no weekends, just work until you die. Why did they do it? Why choose a life of harder labor for what exactly? Foragers eat a varied diet. Berries, nuts, roots, meat, fish, birds, insects, honey. Seasonal, regional, but diverse. That means all the vitamins and minerals, balanced proteins and fats. Farmers? Wheat. Wheat in the morning, wheat at midday, wheat at night. Maybe barley for variety. Grain is mostly carbohydrates with little protein, fat, or vitamins. You can survive on it, yes, but you won't thrive. We can see it in the bones. Archaeologists compare skeletons. Foragers, men around 175 centimeters, women around 165 centimeters. Robust bones, healthy teeth, few signs of chronic disease. Early farmers, men around 160 centimeters, women around 150 centimeters. Weaker bones, lots of cavities, clear markers of malnutrition, iron deficiency, vitamin D deficiency. They got shorter, shrinking over generations, and only in the 20th century, with modern medicine and diversified diets, did we regain forager stature. 10,000 years to get back to zero. Great. Worse than hype are the diseases. Foragers live in small, mobile bands of 20 to 30. If someone gets sick, an infection can only spread to a few dozen, and then the group moves and leaves it behind. Epidemics don't take hold. Farmers gather in permanent villages of hundreds, living alongside animals, sheep in the yard, pigs in the corner, defecating near their water. That's an epidemiological nightmare. Zoonoses explode. Measles from cattle, rinderpest, tuberculosis from cattle, influenza from pigs and birds, smallpox likely from camels or cattle, plague from rodents drawn to granaries. In dense settlements, these spread fast. One child coughs and 10 are sick. One family falls ill and the village follows. Most of these diseases didn't exist among foragers. They're diseases of civilization, gifts of agriculture. Thanks, Neolithic Revolution. If it's so bad, less dietary diversity, more work, more disease, why didn't people just quit? Why not go back to foraging? Because they couldn't. The trap had sprung. Here's the mechanism. Foragers have few children, about 1 every 4 years. You have to carry your child everywhere for years. If you have babies every 2 years, you're carrying 2 at once. That's impossible. So long breastfeeding, which suppresses fertility, and long birth intervals. Farmers, settled in one place, don't carry kids all day. You can leave them in the village with grandma or older siblings. Porridge, made from grain, is ideal baby food. Result? More children, closer together, 1 every 2 years, sometimes every year. Foragers average 4 to 5 children per woman, farmers 6 to 8. Population explodes. In a few generations, it doubles, then triples. Now you have a problem. Your village of 200 grows enough wheat for 200. 1 generation later, there are 400. You can't return to foraging. There's too little wild food for too many mouths. So you clear more forest and plant more wheat. The next generation, you have 800. That's the trap. Agriculture doesn't produce more well-being, it produces more people, who then require more agriculture. You're locked in, and you remain locked in today. It gets worse. Inequality appears. Forager graves tend to be similar. No gold, no treasure, maybe a tool or amulet. After the Neolithic, some graves are lavish. Jewelry, weapons, pottery, food for the afterlife. What happened? Property. For the first time, people own more than they can carry. Fields, houses, stores, animals. Property can be inherited. Your father builds a big field, works hard, dies, you inherit it and start with an advantage. Your neighbor has none and works for you. That's class society, not from malice, but logic. Those with more can produce more, feed more children, hire labor. Those with little work for those with much. Capitalism, baby. 10,000 years old. With property comes conflict. Archaeologists find mass graves starting in the Neolithic. Dozens killed violently, skulls crushed, arrowheads lodged in bone. Not individual burials, just heaps. That's new. Yes, foragers fought, but small-scale feuds between groups. This is massacre. Talheim in Germany, c. 5000 BCE. 34 people, men, women, children, killed with stone axes from behind as they fled. An entire village erased. Why? Likely land, herds, captives, things worth stealing. Foragers own little. There's not much to take. Farmers have fields, stores, livestock, rich targets. If they resist, you kill them. That's why Jericho builds walls and why fortified settlements emerge, not for fun, but from fear.
Another shift, the status of women. Among foragers, women are essential gatherers, often providing 60 to 80% of calories. Men's hunting is prestigious but unreliable. If the hunt fails, the group eats because women gathered. Women hold status, respect, influence. In farming societies, heavy work, plowing, clearing, handling oxen, skews male. Women cook, raise children, grind grain. Agriculture demands more children, more labor. So women spend more of their lives pregnant and nursing and have less time in visible, productive roles. The result tends toward patriarchy. Not everywhere, not instantly, but commonly. In many Neolithic societies, inheritance becomes patrilineal. Land passes to sons, and women become property. Bride wealth, dowries, exchanges between families. That isn't natural or evolutionary, it's a consequence of agriculture. So why did we step into this trap? 3 answers. First, no one knew what they were doing. There was no day when someone declared, "From now on, we're farmers." It was gradual. You gather wild wheat, then you plant a little, then more. Then you build a house, then your family stays. Centuries later, the population is so large, there's no way back. Second, short-term security. Hunting is uncertain. Some years plenty, some years lean. Farming is predictable, an annual harvest you can plan for. Humans prefer certainty, even if it yields less, to uncertainty. Third, population pressure. More children mean more people, which demands more farming, which supports more children. a self-reinforcing loop. Once inside, there's no exit. The Neolithic Revolution wasn't a choice, it was a trap, and we're still in it. Here's the uncomfortable echo. The same thing is happening now. Technology promises an easier life, email, smartphones, always reachable, and then you work more, not less. You're on call 24/7, never truly free. Social media promises connection. Instead, you feel more anxious, depressed, addicted. But hey, at least you're connected. We keep stepping into the same trap. We adopt tech for short-term gains and realize too late that it has us on a leash. Maybe that's the lesson of the Neolithic Revolution. Progress isn't always improvement. Sometimes progress is simply more. More people, more work, more complexity. Not necessarily more happiness. There's no rewinding. The trap is shut. So we move forward. More people bring new problems and new solutions. One of the most important, the potter's wheel. It sounds dull. It isn't. It's the first industrial revolution.
I know what you're thinking. The potter's wheel? That's your big idea? Yes, because this unassuming spinning thing was humanity's first true machine, and it changed everything. Not overnight, not with fireworks, but at the foundations. It's the moment people stop doing everything purely by hand and start letting tools do work for them. That's the first step toward industrialization, specialization, the modern world, and it begins with mud. Imagine you're a Neolithic potter 8,000 years ago. You need a pot for grain, water, whatever. You knead clay and shape it. How? With the coil method. Roll the clay into long snakes, stack ring upon ring, smooth the sides, blend the seams. It takes hours for a single pot. If the clay dries too fast or the coils don't bind, it cracks in the firing. Scrap it and start over. Maybe, you turn out 2 or 3 pots a day if everything goes right. That's too slow for specialization. Everyone makes their own pots on the side between fieldwork and herding. Pottery is handmade, individual, slow. Then everything starts to spin, literally. At some point, likely in the Fertile Crescent around 6000 BCE, someone has a thought. What if the pot stays still and I move around it? Or better yet, what if the pot spins for me? They put a lump of clay on a flat disc of wood or stone and turn the disc slowly by hand while shaping the clay. This slow wheel, or tournette, has no flywheel, no stored energy, just a disc you nudge as you work. Even that is a breakthrough. You no longer walk around the pot, you sit, the disc turns, your hands stay steady. It's faster and more uniform. Suddenly, you can make 5 or 6 pots a day. But that's only the beginning. Around 4000 BCE, the real revolution arrives, probably in Mesopotamia during the Ubaid period. A wheel with a flywheel, a heavy stone disc below, a light working surface above, linked by an axle. You kick the flywheel hard, and it keeps turning for minutes. That's the fast wheel, the first true machine. Why revolutionary? Because it's the first time people store mechanical energy. A flywheel relies on inertia. Once spinning, it resists stopping. You input energy in a burst. The wheel releases it gradually as steady rotation. It's the first step from I work with my hands to I make a tool work for me. You exploit physics, the best exploitation there is. With a fast wheel, one potter can throw 20, 30, even 40 vessels a day. No more painstaking coils, now it's mass production. Everything changes. You can be a full-time potter, no fields, no goats, just you at the wheel, trading pots for food. Markets appear. 10 bowls for wheat. Deal.
That's specialization. For the first time, someone does one thing all day, every day, and becomes very, very good at it. Welcome to capitalism, version 0.1. Something odd follows. Before the wheel, every pot is unique, different sizes, shapes, decorations, because each person makes their own, by hand, with their own aesthetics. After the wheel, pots start to look the same size, shape, thickness. Efficiency rules. If you're making 40 a day, there's no time for endless flourish. You develop a routine, a movement pattern, muscle memory, and each pot comes out identical. That's the birth of mass production and the loss of individuality. Every pot is interchangeable. Eventually, the potter is. Welcome to modernity. It doesn't get kinder.
And pottery isn't just pots, it's technology. Storage. Jars keep grain dry, safe from rodents and moisture. Without ceramic storage, your harvest molds or gets eaten. With it, you build reserves for months, even years. Cooking. Clay vessels tolerate heat. You can make soups, stews, soften grains. Food becomes easier to digest and more nutritious. Trade. Pottery travels and standardizes. I'll sell you 10 jars of oil. How much is a jar? This much, exactly like this one. Ceramics become units of measure. A jar of wine, a bowl of grain, a pot of honey. Trade gets simpler, more standardized, laying the groundwork for money. Not coins yet, but the idea of fixed quantities and exchangeable value. There's a darker side. In the Ubaid culture, Mesopotamia, c. 5000 BCE, archaeologists find thousands of nearly identical rough bowls, no decoration, churned out in bulk, not for sale, for rations, the first state bowls. Mass-produced and handed out to workers. Here's your pay, 1 bowl of grain, be back tomorrow. That's not a free market, it's controlled distribution. Someone, an elite, a temple, a ruler, controls food and dispenses it in standard portions. That's the beginning of bureaucracy, wages, dependency. You don't work for yourself, but for someone else, paid just enough to return. The wheel makes this possible, and with it, the first working class. Potters become employees in workshops under supervision. A master sets quotas, 20 bowls by evening, and the throwers kick and shape, hour after hour. It's not craft as self-expression anymore. It's proto-assembly line labor, 6,000 years ago. At day's end, a bowl of grain. Enough to live, not to rise. The wheel didn't free us. It made us more efficient and productive, not freer. That's civilization's pattern. Technology doesn't make us happier, only more productive. And the gains flow upward. Fun fact, the potter's wheel is older than the transport wheel. Potter's wheel, 9000 BCE. Wagon wheel, 3500 BCE. Why? Because transport wheels are engineering nightmares. Not just a circle, but an axle that rotates without falling out, and ideally bearings to reduce friction. Hard problems. A potter's wheel spins in place with no moving axle relative to a frame. Far simpler. We learned to harness physics for pots before we did for carts. Priorities. So, what did we learn? First, technology enables specialization. The wheel makes full-time potters possible. Efficient, but narrower lives. Second, technology creates mass production, which creates standardization, which creates interchangeability of goods, then of people. Third, technology enables control. Whoever owns the means of production, the wheels, the workshops, holds power. That's the birth of economic hierarchy. And fourth, maybe most important, innovation is neutral. A tool can foster freedom, specialization, trade, prosperity, or oppression, control, dependency, exploitation.
How we use it is on us. The potter's wheel is just one gear in a much larger machine. While potters spin their wheels, something even bigger takes shape. Something that will change the world forever. A city. Not just any city. The first city.
3500 BCE. Southern Mesopotamia between the Euphrates and the Tigris. The sun beats down. The ground is dry and dusty, yet fertile. Canals carry river water to the fields. Wheat grows, barley, dates. And at the center of it all rises an artificial mound crowned with temples. Around it, houses, thousands of houses, and people, 80,000 of them. Welcome to Uruk, the first true city. Not the first village, not the first settlement. The first city with everything that implies: temples, palaces, markets, workshops, administration, and, for the first time in history, writing, but one step at a time. What separates a village from a city? Size, partly, but not only. A village has a few hundred people. Everyone knows everyone, and nearly everyone farms. A city has thousands. You cannot know them all. It runs on specialization: potters, smiths, priests, merchants, and administrators. It has hierarchy: elites, middling folk, laborers, as well as public space, temples, squares, markets. And, above all, it requires coordination. Someone has to organize the chaos. Uruk had all of this and more. At its height, roughly 3,300 to 3,000 BCE, it covered about 5.5 square kilometers, larger than modern Monaco, with at least 40,000 and probably around 80,000 inhabitants. A defensive wall nearly 9.5 kilometers long ringed the city, studded with roughly 900 towers. 80,000 people at a time when most humans lived in bands of 20 or 30. That is astonishing. Uruk was larger than London in the year 1000 CE, 4,000 years later. Why here? Uruk sat on the Euphrates. Water, transport, irrigation. The surrounding land was exceptionally fertile. The rivers flooded regularly, enough to renew the soil with silt without destroying it. With irrigation, farmers could reap 2, sometimes 3 harvests per year. That means surplus, more food than the producers could eat themselves, and surplus flows to the city. Rural fields fed urban lives. Farmers brought grain as tribute or trade. The city stored it and redistributed it to priests, craftspeople, administrators, everyone who did not farm. That rural-urban pipeline is the basic model of civilization. Without it, no cities. At Uruk's heart stood the temple, more precisely, the Inanna precinct, dedicated to the goddess Inanna. It was no single house of worship, but a complex. Multiple temples, courtyards, warehouses, workshops, all raised on an elevated platform, the forerunner of the famous ziggurats. Its walls glittered with mosaics, thousands of painted clay cones pressed into the plaster in geometric patterns: red, black, white. Public art on a monumental scale. A declaration: we are rich, organized, capable. But the temple was not just a statement. It was the city's economic engine. It held land, lots of it. It employed workers by the hundreds and thousands. It stored grain, wool, oil, dates, and paid out rations to priests, artisans, and builders. This was no church, it was a corporation, with the goddess as CEO and the priesthood as management. Who ran it? Literate administrators in priestly garb, people who could read, write, and calculate. They tracked income, outlays, inventories.
They oversaw public works, canals, temples, walls, and they did it all in the name of Inanna, goddess of love, war, fertility, and the heavens. Inanna was Uruk's deity. To oppose the priests was to oppose the goddess. That is not mere piety, it is social technology. In a city of 80,000, order is hard. The gods will it is the simplest organizing principle. It has worked for 5,000 years.
Uruk, though, was more than temples and titles. It was a thrum of trades, potters at their wheels turning out standardized wares, metalworkers smelting copper into tools and weapons, weavers spinning wool into cloth, brickmakers, builders, canal diggers, merchants hauling obsidian from Anatolia and lapis from Afghanistan, bakers, brewers, fishers, scribes, guards. For the first time, there were people who lived their whole lives without ever setting foot in a field or slaughtering an animal. Urbanites depending on the machinery of distribution. Dependency, in turn, demanded trust. Trust that rations would arrive, markets would function, records would be kept. Break that trust, and the city breaks with it. How did it all run, day after day, for tens of thousands of mouths? Water came by canal from the Euphrates, but canals must be dredged and repaired. Organized labor, often compelled, directed by the temple. Food came in from the countryside to temple granaries that needed buildings, guards, and clerks. 80,000 people generate mountains of waste. Much of it went into pits or the river. Security required that immense wall with its towers, manned full-time and paid from temple stores. The whole thing demanded planning, coordination, and record-keeping, which meant the rise of something both necessary and maddening: bureaucracy. Uruk produced thousands of clay tablets a year, scratched with the stuff of ledgers, 200 jars of barley received from Field Team 3, 50 sheep slaughtered, meat issued to temple staff, 12 craftsmen, 5 days' work, pay 2 bowls of grain per day. Not literature, accounting. Dull? Maybe. Essential? Absolutely. Without records, you cannot ration fairly, pay workers, or plan building projects. Without ledgers, the system collapses. This is why writing was invented, not for poetry or myth, but for lists. The first words we meet are barley, sheep, debt. Romantic? Hardly. Revolutionary? Completely. Around 3400 to 3200 BCE, a scribe in Uruk had more to track than memory could hold. 50 jars of beer, 20 sheep, 100 bowls of grain. He took a clay tablet and a reed stylus and drew pictures. A jug for beer, a sheep for a sheep, an ear of grain for grain, with simple notches for numbers. Pictography, not quite writing, but effective. Over the next centuries, the drawings grew abstract, and the reed's wedge-shaped impressions turned pictures into signs. Eventually, signs stood not just for things, but for sounds. The sign for mouth could mean speaking, or the syllable ka. That leap to phonetic writing changed everything. Now you could write names, stories, laws, prayers, contracts. You could speak to the future. Prehistory ends, history begins. What did the first text say? At first, more lists and inventories. Later, by around 2600 BCE, hymns to Inanna, royal inscriptions, proverbs, and much later, but born here, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest great story we know. A king of Uruk who fights monsters, loses his dearest friend, and seeks immortality. He who saw the deep. Not just a tale, but a claim. We are human. We tell stories, and stories endure. Back to the walls.
Who builds a 9.5-kilometer circuit with 900 towers, and why? Because wealth invites enemies, other cities like Kish, Lagash, all contesting land and water. A wall deters attacks and proclaims capacity. Look at our strength and organization. But walls also draw a line, inside and outside, us and them. That is the beginning of identity, citizenship, foreignness, patriotism, nationalism, war. Uruk flourished for centuries, but rivers wander. Around 2000 BCE, the Euphrates shifted its course away from Uruk. No water, no irrigation, no city. Uruk shrank, people moved to and Babylon. In time, only ruins remained. Its legacy did not. What does Uruk teach? Cities require surplus. Without productive fields beyond their gates, they die. Cities require organization, administration, bureaucracy, and writing, or they dissolve into chaos. Cities generate inequality, elites, workers, slaves, an ugly reality. And cities generate culture, art, literature, architecture, things beyond survival. Uruk was unequal, violent, hierarchical, and also creative, innovative, ambitious. It was the beginning of everything: cities, states, civilization. And with cities came something darker that has shadowed us ever since: war. Organized, systematic, lethal war.
Uncomfortable question. When did humans begin killing each other systematically? Not in rage or jealousy, but by plan and policy. The honest answer? As soon as there was something worth stealing. Forager groups fought, yes, feuds, revenge, personal disputes. But these were small affairs. Real organized war begins with civilization, with cities, property, and resources someone can control. Welcome to the Bronze Age, when violence becomes an industry. Weapons are ancient. Spears for hundreds of thousands of years, stone axes longer still. But for most of prehistory, they were multi-purpose tools. A spear hunts deer, and, if need be, a rival. An axe splits wood, and sometimes skulls. From the Neolithic onward, we see something new. Tools that exist only to kill. Battle axes with narrow blades that pierce crania, but are useless on timber. Heavy, head-weighted clubs built to shatter bone. Short daggers made for close combat. Too small for butchery? Perfect for stabbing people. By 4000 BCE, such weapons appear everywhere. In graves, in settlements, in mass burials. Humanity had learned to kill more efficiently. The archaeology is grim. Talheim, in Germany, c. 5000 BCE. A pit with 34 bodies, men, women, children. Skulls crushed by stone axes, many struck from behind as they fled. Not a battle, an extermination. Schletz, in Austria, over 100 dead tossed into a ditch. Aspern Schletz, similar scenes. Erxheim, hundreds of human bones, many chopped and split. Some show cut marks like butchered livestock. Was it cannibalism, ritual murder, war crimes? We don't know. We do know it was systematic. Why annihilate whole communities? 3 grim reasons. First, land. Populations grew, farming spread. Good fields were limited. The river plains, the irrigable parcels. When your village expands, you need more plots. Option A, move and find new land. Option B, take someone else's. Option B is easier, especially if your neighbor is small and unprepared. You raid, kill the men, seize the fields. Colonialism, 7,000 years early. Second, stores.
Cities like Uruk kept granaries full of grain, oil, and dates for winter and drought. If your harvest fails while your neighbor's stores are full, you can trade, beg, or take. In hard times, many chose violence. Third, women. Dark but historically real. In many early societies, women were unevenly distributed. Elites hoarded multiple wives, while poorer men had none. Genetics suggests far more women than men reproduced, meaning some men had many children, while many had none. Young men without prospects become desperate, angry, reckless. When a leader promises, "Follow me, we'll raid the village next door and you'll get wives," they follow. That's not justification, just explanation. Often, war was about reproductive access. Here's what changes after 4000 BCE. War becomes professional. Not everyone fights. Specialists do. Men who train and drill, who don't plow, throw pots, or weave. They fight. They are paid by temple or king in rations. A standing force shifts the balance. 100 trained soldiers beat 500 part-time farmers. Training, discipline, coordination, that's the edge professionalism buys.
If everyone is fighting, you fortify. Hence Jericho's wall, Uruk's vast curtain with its towers, and the fortifications of every great city, walls, ditches, palisades, watchtowers. Forts are expensive. Stone, brick, endless labor, and constant upkeep. Only large, wealthy, centralized polities can afford them. War thus drives centralization. It creates states. Only a state can summon the resources war demands. The military-industrial complex is 6 millennia old. Win a raid? What about the captured women and children? Kill them or enslave them. Increasingly, societies chose enslavement. Slaves worked fields, molded bricks, dug canals, built temples, and cost almost nothing beyond subsistence. Immoral? Yes. Economically efficient? Also yes. That is why slavery became an institution, not born of sadism, but of cold calculus. Conquest supplied the bodies. War became profitable not only for land, but for labor. Capture 100 people, set them to work, harvest the surplus, grow richer. That was the logic of antiquity for 4,000 years. War needs leadership, someone to decide when and how to strike, to organize armies and plan. These were the first kings, not priests or bookkeepers, but war chiefs, Lugal or big man, or ensi or ruler. Early on, perhaps they were chosen in emergencies by councils of elders. We're under threat, lead us, for now. But emergencies rarely end. There's always another enemy. Eventually, the Lugal says, "I'll stay." Who objects? He has the army. Military power becomes political power. Leaders become monarchs and often dictators. Power alone doesn't last. It needs legitimacy. Enter religion. I am not merely king, I was chosen by the gods. Inanna granted me the throne. Enlil blessed me. Rebellion against the king becomes rebellion against heaven, a mortal and spiritual crime. Palace and temple fuse. Kings rule with priests or as priests. The pattern repeats for millennia across the world. With writing, wars gain names. The first we know by name is Lagash versus Umma, c. 2450 BCE, 2 Sumerian city-states fighting over a border tract. Eonatum of Lagash marched and won, or so his monument declares. We know because he raised the stele of the vultures, carved ranks of soldiers with spears, shields, helmets, and carrion birds wheeling over the dead. Propaganda, pure and simple. I triumphed. I am powerful. The gods favor me. The losers left no stele. History has been written by winners for 45 centuries. War is costly, not only in lives, but in logistics. 1,000 men must eat, tons of provisions daily. Weapons must be forged and repaired.
Training takes months and years. Troops must be moved with their supplies across long distances. That is expensive. Who pays? The populace. Higher taxes, more corvée labor, more rations for soldiers, and fewer for everyone else. War enriches kings and strengthens states while impoverishing ordinary people. That is civilization's paradox. The stronger the state, the harsher the life for most. So, what is war good for? For states. War compels organization, centralization, bureaucracy. It produces hierarchies, armies, monarchies, elites. It justifies taxes, forced labor, control. Is it good for people? No. Is it good for civilization? In a bleak sense, yes. Without the pressure of neighbors and the threat of force, there would have been fewer incentives to build states. No armies, no kings, no centralized power, just scattered villages and tribes. No empires. War has been a motor of history. That is the uncomfortable truth. But conquest alone doesn't run a state. You must administer it. Pay soldiers, count plunder, collect tribute. For that, you need new tools to keep everything in view. Seals, tokens, and eventually, writing.
Imagine you're a temple administrator in Uruk around 3500 BCE. Every day, farmers arrive with offerings: grain, sheep, oil. Every day, workers depart with rations: grain, beer, dates. You cannot keep it all in your head. The human brain isn't built for operations at this scale. You need an external memory, something outside your skull that remembers for you. Humans invented 3 things in sequence to solve this: seals, tokens, writing. Steps from chaos to order, from "I think I recall" to "it's recorded." Start with seals, small carved objects of stone, bone, or clay that leave a distinctive impression when pressed into soft clay or wax. One pattern, yours, means "this is mine. I authorized this. I was here." The earliest seals, circa 7000 BCE, carry simple geometric designs. Later they depict animals, symbols, narrative scenes. They mark ownership, seal a basket of grain so any tampering is visible, signal authority, only the authorized keeper may break the seal, and establish identity, like a signature. They are the first personal marks of accountability. Flat seals are slow. Press, lift, press, lift. Tiresome if you must mark 100 jars. Around 3500 BCE, someone innovated the cylinder seal, a small engraved roller you pass over moist clay to create a continuous scene in a single motion. Faster, cleaner, and capable of complex images: gods, kings, animals, rituals, functional art, and a personal emblem. The oldest profile picture, if you like. Seals do not answer one crucial question: how much? A sealed basket is yours, but does it hold 10 jars of grain? 20? 50? You don't know without opening it. The workaround was tokens, small clay counters of different shapes, each standing for a unit of something. A sphere might represent a sheep, or a measure of grain depending on the system. A cone, a jar of oil. A cylinder, an animal. A disc, something else. Meanings varied, but the principle was consistent. 1 token equals 1 unit. Here's how it worked. You deliver 10 sheep. I give you 10 sphere tokens. You put them into a clay envelope, literally a hollow clay ball. Seal it, and now you have a receipt. Without opening it, everyone knows you're owed 10 sheep. When you return to collect, we break the envelope and count. Physical accounting, simple and effective. But sealed envelopes are opaque. You know tokens are inside, not which or how many. You have to break them to see, and then the seal is gone. Annoying. Somewhere, likely in Uruk around 3300 BCE, someone thought, what if we press the tokens into the envelope's surface before sealing? Now the outside shows what's inside.
Later, someone asked a bigger question. If the impressions are on the outside, why keep the tokens inside at all? That was the pivot. You no longer needed counters, you needed only their marks. The objects became symbols. Scratch the impressions directly into a flat tablet, and you've created proto-writing. The earliest tablets from Uruk, around 3400 to 3200 BCE, are pictograms. A head with a mouth for person or eat, an ear of grain for barley, a sheep for sheep, a jar for beer, naturally. Not true writing yet, stylized pictures, but combinable. Mouth plus water becomes drink. Person plus mountain means slave, because foreigners often came from uplands. Woman plus mountain means female slave. Symbols combine to make new meanings. Grammar in embryo.
Numbers mattered most. Sumerians used a sexagesimal base 60 system because 60 divides neatly by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30, practical for trade. Their numerals were elegant, small wedges for ones, larger wedges for tens, a circle for 60. With them, you could express large values efficiently, the leap from 3 sheep to the abstraction 3. Abstract number makes sophisticated accounting and eventually mathematics possible. And what do the earliest tablets say? Not poems, not love letters, lists. 29 cows, 50 jars of beer, 120 bowls of grain for workers, 18 sheep received from Farmer X. The first written content is bookkeeping, not romance. That's exactly right. Writing was invented to manage a city of 80,000 people, to keep everyone fed, paid, and accounted for. Writing isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Who could write? Very few. Writing is hard. There were hundreds of signs to memorize, and it took years to learn them. So scribal schools arose. Children, usually from elite families, entered at 7 or 8 and spent long days copying old texts, lists, even multiplication tables. Teachers were strict. We even have student complaints. The teacher beat me for being late, for talking, for making a bad tablet. Education has always been tough. Those who made it became scribes, the elite bearers of knowledge, indispensable to temples, palaces, and merchants. They knew their worth. A Sumerian proverb runs, "The scribe who knows the numbers will never go hungry." Pictograms, however, hit a ceiling. You can draw sheep, grain, beer, but how do you draw freedom, happiness, or yesterday? You can't, not with pictures alone. The solution was phoneticization. Signs began to stand for sounds, not just objects. A sign for water, pronounced ah, could represent the syllable ah in any word. Like a rebus, b plus leaf can spell belief. Once signs encode sounds, you can write anything. Names, verbs, adjectives, abstractions. That transition from pictures to phonetic script unfolded roughly 2900 to 2600 BCE, an evolutionary blink. Pause and consider what writing truly means. Before writing, knowledge is fragile. What you know dies with you. You pass it on orally, and it warps, fades, disappears. With writing, knowledge becomes durable. You can speak to people 1,000 years hence, people not yet born, who may not even speak your language, yet can decode your marks, understand, and build on them. That is a kind of immortality, not of the body, but of the mind. Your thoughts, ideas, and stories outlive you. Writing is the most important human invention, more than fire, more than the wheel, because it lets us stand on the shoulders of giants. We're not quite at epics and law codes yet. For now, we have symbols, numbers, and lists. Give it a few more centuries, and writing will cease merely to administer
and begin to create.
3200 BCE, Uruk. A scribe sits before a fresh clay tablet. He takes a reed, presses it into the soft clay, leaves wedges and strokes, symbols. In that moment, without realizing it, he does something that will change the world forever. He writes. Not just numbers, not just pictures, he writes words. With those words, prehistory ends. With those words, history begins. From now on, we don't only see people, their bones, tools, buildings. We can hear them, their voices, their thoughts, their fears, their dreams. Welcome to history. Let's be clear about what writing actually is, because there are important differences. Pictography. Pictures stand for objects. A sheep means a sheep. Simple but limited. You can express abstractions. Ideography. Signs stand for ideas. A circle for sun, or God, or day. Better, but still limited, and culture-bound. Logography. Characters stand for whole words. Chinese works like this, thousands of signs, hard to master, but precise. Phonetic writing. Signs stand for sounds, alphabets and syllabaries, what we mostly use today. Fewer signs, easier to learn, more universal. Sumerian cuneiform is a blend. Logograms plus phonetic signs plus determinatives, markers that add context. Complex, but it works. And crucially, it is true writing because it encodes language, not just things or numbers, but the full range of human speech. That is the breakthrough. The development took centuries. Around 3400 BCE, the signs are still pictorial. A sheep looks like a sheep. By 3200, they're stylized, faster to draw. Around 3000, they rotate 90 degrees, practical for left to right strokes. By 2900, signs also represent sounds. And by 2600, cuneiform is fully fledged, hundreds of signs with grammar and syntax. Not a single invention, but an iterative climb. Each generation makes it a little better, a little quicker, until suddenly it's a complete system. Why does cuneiform look the way it does, those little wedges? Reed and clay. The tool shapes the medium. A reed stylus pressed into soft clay leaves triangular wedges and straight lines, not smooth curves. Try drawing a circle in clay with a reed. It's awkward. Straight strokes? Perfect. The script adapts to the tool. That adaptation is brilliant. Cuneiform is fast. A skilled scribe can write hundreds of signs in an hour, much faster than painstaking pictures. And clay? In Mesopotamia, it's everywhere. Cheap, abundant. You shape a tablet, write, let it dry, that's it. And clay happens to last for millennia, which is why we have hundreds of thousands of Sumerian tablets. The Sumerians accidentally left us the perfect archival medium. So, what did they write? Between 2900 and 2600 BCE, it's still mostly administration. Lists, inventories, transactions. 50 sheep received, 20 workers, 5 days, canal digging. Rations issued, 30 bowls of grain. Dull? Maybe. Essential? Absolutely. This is what keeps a city running. Between 2600 and 2400 BCE, we finally see literature. Hymns, prayers, royal inscriptions. At last, hymns to Inanna, Uruk's goddess, Lady of Heaven, Queen of Earth, who orders the stars and calms the chaos. Great is your name, mighty your power. Poetry. Art. Not just bookkeeping, expression. For the first time, people write because they want to, not because they have to. Then come the kings, who adore writing because writing enables propaganda. Eonatum of Lagash raises the stele of the vultures. I, Eonatum, chosen by Enlil, loved by Inanna, struck down the enemies of Lagash. 3,600 fell by my hand. Their bodies covered the field. A humble brag, 5,000 years old. But it's more than boasting, it's power made permanent. If you can read, the claim is literally carved in stone. Next milestone, laws. The Code of Ur-Nammu, c. 2100 BCE, is the oldest known law code. Before this, laws lived in memory, judges and elders reciting, revising, bending. With writing, the rules are fixed. If a man kills another, he shall be put to death. If a man seduces another man's wife, he shall pay. If a man breaks a slave's nose, he shall pay a mina of silver. Rule of Law, version 1.0. Hardly perfect, but visible. Anyone, at least in theory, can know the rules and claim their protection. Of course, in practice, only elites can read. Writing is hard. Cuneiform uses 600 signs, and later more. Mastery takes years. So who learns? Sons of elites, priests' sons, administrators' sons, merchants' sons, and only rarely daughters. The rest are illiterate. Writing, therefore, reinforces inequality. Knowledge is power, and knowledge is monopolized. If you can't read, you depend on those who can. This tablet says you owe 50 bowls of grain, the scribe declares, and you must take his word for it.
Even so, writing now exists. The knowledge is out there, and over the centuries it spreads, slowly but surely. With writing come libraries, not like ours with books and quiet reading rooms, but archives, rooms crammed with tablets, stacked, labeled, cataloged. Early examples in temples and palaces. Ebla's archive in Syria, circa 2500 BCE, with over 17,000 tablets. Ashurbanipal's library in Nineveh, circa 650 BCE, with more than 30,000. Contracts, letters, royal annals, hymns, myths, epics, mathematics, astronomy, medicine. The human record, curated. The knowledge is no longer only in heads, it lives in rooms, accessible, copyable, durable. When a civilization dies, its library can remain. Millennia later, we can dig it up, read, and understand. That's the gift of writing. Then there's literature. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest story we know in written form, set down around 2100 BCE, but older in oral tradition. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, half man, half god, arrogant and cruel, meets his match in Enkidu, a wild man created by the gods to challenge him. They fight and become inseparable friends, defeat monsters, Humbaba of the cedar forest, the bull of heaven, and then Enkidu dies. Gilgamesh is shattered. He confronts mortality for the first time and resolves to defeat it. He journeys to the ends of the earth to find Utnapishtim, survivor of the Great Flood and the only mortal granted eternal life. Utnapishtim lays down a test: stay awake for 7 days and nights. Gilgamesh tries and falls asleep. He fails. He returns to Uruk without immortality, but with wisdom. The poem ends. He built the walls of Uruk. He wrote his deeds in stone. Memory, not everlasting life, is how humans endure. It's a story about stories, a text about texts. The idea that writing, not the gods, makes us immortal. Gilgamesh was right. He lives because he was written. Writing spreads. Cuneiform is adopted by Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Hittites, Elamites. 3,000 years as the Near East's lingua franca. Elsewhere, new scripts arise. Egyptian hieroglyphs circa 3200 BCE, perhaps independent, perhaps inspired. The Indus script circa 2600 BCE, still undeciphered. Chinese writing circa 1200 BCE, certainly independent. Writing wasn't a one-off invention. It was invented multiple times because complex societies need it. But cuneiform has a problem. Hundreds of signs, hard to learn, easy to monopolize. Around 1800 to 1050 BCE, something radical appears, the alphabet, likely from Canaanite speakers in the Levant. One sign per sound, not a word, not a syllable, but a phoneme. How many sounds does a language have? Maybe 20 to 30. That means you need only 20 to 30 signs, not 600. That is democratizing. Anyone can learn in weeks, not years. Traders, soldiers, farmers. Writing escapes the priestly class. The Phoenician alphabet, circa 1050 BCE, spreads to Greece, to Rome, across the Mediterranean. It seeds Greek, Latin, Cyrillic, Arabic. Most modern scripts trace back to it. The alphabet may be the most influential invention humanity ever made because it makes writing universal. Zoom out. What does writing truly mean? First, writing is external memory. You don't have to carry everything in your head. You can write it down, look it up, pass it on. That multiplies human intelligence. Second, writing is a time machine. You speak to the future speaks to you. Gilgamesh talks across 4,000 years. We, in turn, speak to people 4,000 years from now when they read our records. Third, writing is power. Those who control knowledge shape society. Laws, contracts, stories, all in the hands of the literate. Fourth, writing is culture. Without it, no philosophy, no science, no literature. What we call civilization rests on writing. And fifth, perhaps most important, writing is the line between before and after. Prehistory is not nothing happened. It's simply the time before we can hear the voices. With writing, people speak. With writing, our particular journey ends, because from 3200 BCE onward, history in the strict sense begins. Names, dates, documents. The Sumerians will found kingdoms, wage wars, issue laws. Egyptians will raise pyramids and deify pharaohs. The Indus civilization will blossom and vanish mysteriously. China will rise and become the longest continuous civilization, but all that is another story. For now, we have reached the invention of civilization's engine, from naked apes to city dwellers with libraries, from foragers to kings and scribes, from stone tools to cuneiform.
We've reached the end. From 200,000 years ago to 3000 BCE in a couple of hours. It's a lot, I know. So let's pause and ask, what did we actually learn? Not just facts and dates, but about ourselves, about people, about civilization, about how we ended up here. First lesson, and maybe the most uncomfortable, civilization didn't make us better. Foragers worked 3 to 5 hours a day, ate diverse diets, were taller, stronger, healthier, lived with less hierarchy and more equality. Early farmers and townsfolk worked 12 to 14 hours, ate mostly grain, were shorter, sicker, died younger, and lived under rigid hierarchies with war and slavery. So why did we do it? Because we had to. Populations grew, resources tightened, and there was no way back. Civilization isn't an upgrade, it's a trade. We traded leisure for security, health for stability, equality for order. And sometimes the deal was terrible, but the trap had sprung. Second lesson, belief came before power. Göbekli Tepe flipped the script. We assumed farming turned into surplus, then towns and temples. Instead, temples came first. People built sanctuaries before houses, gathered around belief
before grain. Why? Because humans need meaning, not just food and survival, but something larger that tells us why we're here, where we go, what follows death. Religion isn't the opiate of the people, it's the glue of the people. Cohesion, rules, justification for sacrifice, and yes, a tool of control. Without it, no large-scale cooperation, no Göbekli Tepe, no Uruk, no pyramids. Religion is fundamental, for good and for ill. Third lesson, where you're born decides almost everything. The Fertile Crescent won the resource lottery. Wheat, barley, lentils, sheep, goats, cattle, pigs, ready to domesticate. Sub-Saharan Africa, Australia, North America weren't so lucky. They lacked the right suite of plants and animals. That doesn't mean Fertile Crescent peoples were smarter or more industrious. They were fortunate. That head start, 5,000 years, echoes to this day in the rise of early empires, technology, and, eventually, colonialism, industrialization, globalization. Geography is destiny. Unfair, but true. Fourth lesson, writing is the most important thing we ever invented. Before writing, we are fleeting. Our thoughts die with us. With writing, we persist. Gilgamesh lives. So do Plato, the Buddha, Confucius, not because their bodies endured, but because their words did. Today it's tablets of clay, books of paper, servers in the cloud. The medium changes. The miracle is the same. Collective, cumulative, near immortal memory. Fifth, and the one that matters most, we are the same people. Biologically identical. A baby from Uruk raised in New York would be indistinguishable from a modern child. Same fears, hopes, dreams. The Sumerians wanted what we want: food, safety, love, esteem, good stories, friends, family, a better life for their kids. We're not different, we just have better tools. Smartphones instead of tablets, streaming instead of storytellers, social media instead of marketplace gossip. The gossip hasn't changed, only the lighting has. Studying the past is studying ourselves. Their mistakes are our mistakes. Their triumphs, ours. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and if we don't listen, we'll keep making the same errors.
Back to the beginning. Stories by firelight. People gathering to tell and listen, to laugh and cry, to fear and hope. We still do that. The fire is a screen now. The stories are videos and films. The impulse is unchanged. We are still the storytellers and the story listeners, gathering around the glow to share what matters. This story has been my campfire tale about us, about civilization, about the long, strange path from there to here. Thank you for listening. Is the future grim? Sometimes it feels that way. Climate, war, inequality, pandemics, the same problems as 5,000 years ago, only bigger. But we endure. We survived ice ages, volcanoes, droughts, plagues. We are stubborn, adaptable, cooperative, and, maybe most importantly, creative. We built Göbekli Tepe without metal or wheels. We invented writing from mud and reeds. We flew to the moon. We built the internet. What comes next? I don't know. I'm betting it will be wild, astonishing, and deeply human. We don't travel into the past. We travel into ourselves. We don't meet Sumerians. We meet us in another time with other tools, the same hopes, fears, dreams. Maybe that's the lesson. Despite war and hunger and injustice, we are still here, still telling stories,
still hoping. That's it. From naked apes to scribes, from stones to cities, from darkness to writing. 200,000 years. If you made it this far, respect. This wasn't easy. It was long, complex, sometimes bleak. I hope you took something with you, a new angle on civilization, a little more awe for those who came before us, or simply a sense of wonder. If you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up. It helps the algorithm. If you want more, subscribe. There are more stories to come. And if you have thoughts, questions, critiques, additions, drop them in the comments. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and above all, stay human.